A few weeks before the British leave the EU internal market and customs union, it is still unclear whether there will be a trade deal or a hard Brexit, or if you prefer that term, an Afghanistan-style deal. That is the state of the negotiations. A no deal about the future relationship is still in the room. Nobody would rule him out at the start of another crucial week of negotiations on a future EU-UK trade deal this week. EU officials are preparing for either breakthrough or breakdown of the talks. In order to increase the pressure on a deal, there are more and more warnings of the impending chaos. Ireland's Prime Minister, and that's a discussion point all the time, when I use the job descriptions of politicians, I use the English translations. I don't call Merkel Kanzler, and that's why I also don't call Micheál Martin Taoiseach. But once again, Ireland's Prime Minister Micheál Martin urged that breaking of negotiations would have catastrophic consequences for all concerned. The Bank of England's prediction that the economic price of an unregulated Brexit would be many times higher than the cost of the corona crisis in the long term caused a stir. Bank of England Chairman Andrew Bailey fears a slump in trade, and he wonders how the EU and the UK can approach each other again if they fail. The real economy will take a long time to adapt to the changes in openness in trade profiles, said Bailey. No doubt it would be better to have a commercial contract. The virus forced the island into a severe recession in the second quarter, with GDP falling 20 percentage points. Despite the summer recovery, in view of the spreading second wave, the Bank of England is currently assuming that economic output will remain 1.75 percentage points below the pre-crisis scenario until the end of 2023. In September, the London School of Economics assessed the long-term damage of Brexit without a trade agreement 2 to 3 times higher than the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. 8% less growth over a decade. The head of the central bank received opposition from the Chancellor of the Conservative government of Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The economic damage of the corona pandemic far exceeds that of a hard Brexit, countered Rishi Sunak in a BBC interview earlier this week. A deal would be preferable, he asserted, but Britain's economy will continue to thrive one way or the other. How likely is a last-minute agreement? The one hurdle to a deal is the increasingly isolated Prime Minister Boris Johnson, tweeted Will Hutton, an economist and publicist critical of the government. With the departure of Chief Advisor Dominic Cummings from Downing Street, another Brexit hardliner left the government. But whether that affects Johnson's willingness to compromise remains a mystery. Some rapprochement in the negotiations suggests that the heads of state and government might come to power in the next few days to remove any remaining obstacles. EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen spoke of progress and more movements on important issues. Later on, she talked about the difficulties, but it's still not over yet. The teams of experts work day and night on the text of the contract. What signals is the EU negotiator sending? It seems that the EU side is leaving no stone unturned. They doesn't want to be accused of anything. A COVID case in the warehouse of EU chief negotiator Michel Barnier caused delays. At the beginning of the negotiations this week, Barnier tweeted that there were fundamental differences of opinion, but they were still working hard on an agreement via video link. In any case, the draft of the trade agreement is largely in place because many detailed questions have actually been clarified. But as long as this does not apply to the important points of contention, the present 600-page draft contract is not worth anything. What are the remaining issues? One of the unanswered questions is how to prevent British products from being heavily subsidized starting next January and being exported to the EU internal market at dumping prices. The British side has so far been unwilling to adhere to the EU state aid rules. But to add this, they were willing to adhere to the Japanese state aid rules, which are much stricter than the EU ones. London would also have to maintain the current EU environment, climate, and health and safety regulations if it wants to keep duty-free access to the EU internal market in return. The EU is offering London a 000 solution. No tariffs, no quotas, no dumping. In the event that there are violations, it must be clarified which authority checks the rules of the game and distributes yellow or red cards. I believe there's a compromise that can lead to an arbitration mechanism, said Irish Prime Minister Micheál Martin. How far are the positions in the fisheries dispute apart? Fishing rights are less fundamental and not of great economic importance. Nevertheless, they are symbolically highly charged because, for example, all of French herring comes from British waters. How much fish the EU trawlers are still allowed to catch in British territorial waters is apparently the greatest gap between the two sides. Ireland's Prime Minister Martin is still cautiously optimistic. A proposal should be developed here in the next few days, he said. Why is there no result shortly before everything goes down? London must actually be eager for a free trade agreement with the EU, because a hard break or an Afghanistan-style deal would be economically more painful in the next few years than a regulated connection with a limited trade agreement. The ruling Conservatives do not want to be persuaded into fiscal and economy policy. Ultimately, the pursuit of a clear break, a liberation from the Brussels dictate, and the regaining of unrestricted national sovereignty stood at the beginning of the Brexit dynamic. What a nonsense. How does the change of power in Washington affect the talks? Johnson actually wanted a quick trade deal with Donald Trump's administration. For the hardliners, an agreement with the US has always been the gold standard with which they have justified Brexit. Although they always forgot that there's still a Congress and not the President, but the Congress is making the trade pacts. But okay. In the meantime, London has signed free trade agreements with Canada and Japan. Welcome, copy and paste, and take out some good parts and add some bad ones. But if you call it a success, you're welcome to do so. The new US government, however, is sending negative signals. They believe Brexit is the wrong way to go, which also endangers peace on the Irish island. After all, the president-elect is of Irish descent. In the UK, it is now said that Johnson should at least conclude a deal with the EU so as not to start relations with Biden at war from the outset. And once again, this war terminology. Who is stopping the clock? The parliaments of the EU member states and the United Kingdom, as well as the European Parliament, would have to ratify an agreement by December 31st. The time is already running out just for the translations of the agreement into the 23 official EU languages before the last regular meeting of the European representatives in mid-December. Presumably a special session would be called. One could also make just the English version the basis of the ratification process, but France and Italy are said to be resisting this. And I think the Dutch as well meanwhile. What happens without an agreement? In the event of a hard Brexit without an agreement, and because you always like this Australia style, Canada style and so on stuff, this would mean an Afghanistan style agreement. The UK would be treated like other third countries, and even worse than many other third countries that do have deals with the EU, and would have to deal with tariffs, trade and travel restrictions. The rules of the World Trade Organization, the WTO, apply, and that means different tariffs on different groups of goods. But even a new trade agreement would require new procedures. In that case, however, the chaos should be clearer and it would be easier to bridge a transition with a deadline for adjustments. And if you now want to know more about Brexit, first of all, subscribe to my channel, and YouTube has chosen another of my videos right here for you on the end screen. And if you're also interested in European and global news and politics, I have 2 more channels. I have many more, but these 2 are about these topics and they are right up there. I'll see you in my next video. Click and enjoy. Viel Spaß.